So doors closed, I guess. On behalf of Berlinale Talents, a warm welcome to the session Secrets of a Happy Marriage. So we are revealing secrets the whole week of Berlinale Talents this year. And it's a pleasure that this panel is also supported by Creative Europe, the media program of the European Union. And it's also a pleasure that we have Laurent Bertrand today with us from the European Commission for Media. Please come on stage and tell us a little bit about Creative Europe Media. Media was also the partner from the very first beginning of this program here, and we are happy to continue this also in the future. Please give her a warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Christine. Indeed, it looks like a very trustworthy marriage between Creative Europe Media and Berlinale Talents. I have to say, on behalf of the Commission, that we are extremely proud to support you and to support you since the beginning. So the European money is scarce. We are in a period of scarce resource, but definitely in investing in the future and in making sure that our investment make an impact is the most important, and we believe that the money couldn't be best invested. Of course, Creative Europe Media helps the industry to adapt to the challenges of today, digitalization, globalization, but also preparing tomorrow. And here with the talents, I'm sure that it's the best way to do so. I understand that amongst the secrets that will be discussed today, it will be also a lot about co-productions. Co-productions are in the DNA of media. We want to make film travel so that they reach their fair audience, and definitely co-production are a must to do so. So I won't speak any longer. Thank you very much for what you do, and thank you for giving us the visibility to associate with you. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you too. We have also two colleagues here from one of our main partners here in the audience. It's Veronika Grob and Esther Rotstege from Medienboard Berlin-Brandenburg, so welcome. You will also have the chance to talk to everybody after this session, because we will have a network breakout between 1 and 2 o'clock, so please stay here also, and we invited also for the network breakout some German producers. They will also join us later. Thank you, Lauriane. I give the floor now to Henning Kamm, a very well-known German producer, also alumni of the Talents program, and you started also with an international co-production 10 years ago, also together with us, with the program. And yeah, I'm happy that you're also giving the experience also further to the talents here, and I wish you a nice conversation here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. So welcome everybody to the Secrets of a Happy Marriage. I'd like to ask some questions to you first. First, I'd like to understand who in the room is a producer? Who's a director? Who's a DOP? No DOPs? Good. Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. You didn't wait up there. Stay strong. And actors and actresses? A few. Okay. So it's mainly directors and producers. And who of you is married? Okay, so at least a few. So maybe you can even take something. You can take something away from your marriage when we're finished with this talk. But obviously, we're talking about films. Each film is a prototype, as I guess all of you know. Even though there might be questions that I guess the producers in this room, who has co-produced out of the producers, who has co-produced a film so far? Okay, a few. So there's going to be stuff that you already know or that you've heard in a different context, but since each film is a prototype, then again it's going to be specific, so I hope that at the very end we'll get to a point where you do find out some secrets that you might not be able to apply directly to whatever challenges you're facing, but what you take away is an idea of how to adapt and make it work for yourself. Me, as being a producer, I like to be very structured and very straightforward, but that doesn't mean that you can't just raise your hand and ask a question in between if we pass on something that you think you would like to get deeper into it. And otherwise, I'd like to go move straight forward chronologically. So I'll start at the very beginning with a couple of basic questions to these three producers from Argentina, from Brazil, and from France, who made this wonderful film, who's been now to Sundance, you said, and you went to...
No, it was at Panorama.
No, oh, I'm sorry, so, okay, my apologies. But who's premiered here at Panorama, and you said that that you worked on the first feature of the director that was actually co-produced in between Argentina and France, but you were not a producer. How did you then move on to become the producer on this film?
Actually, I'm close friends with Julia, the filmmaker, so I followed the process of her first feature film. I was reading the scripts, commenting first rough, and trying to help her in funding in Brazil, because it was not easy back there to make a first feature film. And at the end, the film became a co-production with France and Argentina, with both France and Argentina being the main producers of the film. Brazil was the minority producer. But, and then that's how, in between, I decided to shift from film programming to production. And Julia came with me presenting first 12 pages from the new project. And it was really successful, the first one, with Juliette Lepoutre and Felicitas Raffo. And the idea was moving together for the second feature with both of them on board.
How did you meet? Was it as a supermarket or a bar or a market? Or?
We met when, I have to apologize, I'm losing my voice, so I will do my best, but with the microphone.
But it sounds beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. We met actually when the film was released in Brazil at the Rio de Janeiro Film Festival, and at the big team party, which became a Brazilian, there was a Brazilian party last night, so it became a huge party, and this is where we met with Tatiana, who at the time was a film programmer of a very good short film festival. And, we hook up, and when she was on board for the second feature, we already knew each other. She's fluent in French. I'm fluent in Spanish, but we speak Portuguese all together, and it was an obvious relationship.
So you actually met for the first time after you had worked together on the film, basically. You not really being a producer, but you'd been attached to the project.
Yeah, Tati, she was a friend of Julia. She was not really on the production of the film. Okay. She was a friend. This is why we didn't meet during the production. Actually, maybe we met at the time. I can't remember. No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. I went to search for locations with Julia, but I don't think we met.
But what's even more funny is that Felicitas and I were not the main producer financially, but we were all producing Historias, Julia Murat's first feature, that was in the Venice, how is it? Giornata. Venice Days in 2011. So we were producing together, but we only met really physically
yesterday.
What?
No, we met 2 years ago.
Yeah.
2 years ago in San Sebastian, because Felicitas is also working with Julia Solomonov, the director from Argentina, and I was meeting Julia because she was traveling more.
Yeah.
At the time, you were more based in Argentina,
yes.
Not traveling so much. She has many kids.
Yes, I have three.
So we were working all the time together on Skype and talking, but mainly meeting Julia.
And you never had a drink together before?
We never had a drink together, only after the film. Yes, so it can happen.
That's very, very rare. You rather want to have a good drink with your partner before you go on an adventure like this, I guess.
But this whole story is also Julia Solomonov and Julia Murat had done a writing session in Barcelona, in Madrid, and both being directors, they hooked up and decided that they would produce each other's film. And Julia is working with Felicitas,
Yeah.
and so that's how it all worked together.
Okay.
It's very peculiar.
It's very particular, but
You
there's
know,
been...
you're talking Latin America. It's like, well, first sight, not really, but if there is a connection through other people, it's there.
Yeah, I was just about to say, so there were a couple of relationships of full trust, so, and that could be, so that grew from person to another circle. Okay, very interesting. So, what was the idea behind, so you worked together on the first one, so naturally you would say, because it was successful, it was a natural given thought, I guess, that you said we would work together again. Were there other reasons? Was it, for example, because not naturally do you do this, you know? Sometimes the script is something that you don't like, or you can't get attached to, and if I can't get attached to a script, even though I've had a relationship with a filmmaker before, I probably won't be the best guy to produce and co-produce. Was there a continuation also in terms of
Yeah, for us, we're also doing international sales on the film, because the company produces and does international sales. So we were the sales agents, so we traveled a lot after with the film and with Julia. And I remember at the Abu Dhabi Film Festival, you know, after a film with directors, sometimes it's difficult. To finish a film is very difficult for the producer, but also for the director. And sometimes, you know, it gets more tense. And we had the film festival, and the film won Best Film. And when you win Best Film in Abu Dhabi, it means also a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. It's beautiful. I've had that twice.
Yes, for the director, unfortunately.
Well, usually, can I say one thing? What we always had with our directors was a rule that whoever won a prize, an award, everything would be split. Everything would be split 50-50, because we as producers, we took so much risk in doing all the festival submissions, and it's a lot of work, you know, so we always said, let's split everything 50-50, no matter what award. And it always went very well, because it gave us an incentive to really work on festival submissions and get the film out there, you know, otherwise if you don't get paid for this, it's a little difficult if you're an independent producer. You need to make money to keep your business afloat and to make more films. And there was one occasion where a director wasn't happy with that paragraph in the contract, and he was a close friend, but he was really pissed off. He said, how is that possible? It's my award, it's my money, I don't want to share this with you. And we said, well, you know, we love you, but this is non-negotiable. So either you sign this, or we're not going to make this film together. And so he eventually signed. He didn't talk to us for 2 days. Seriously, he didn't talk to us for 2 days. And then we made the film, and that was at the very beginning, and it was a short. And we made the film, and the film won in Abu Dhabi an award, and it was $20,000. No, it was $10,000. No, it was $20,000. A lot of money. And I call him up, and I'm like, listen, we got an award. We just won $20,000 in Abu Dhabi. And he's like, oh, great, so I have to give you $10,000. What? That's not good news. And I said, well, actually, it's a producer's award. So you get $10,000 from us. And that was the only award, that film ever won. So I think it's really in the best interest for everybody to do it like this, because then, you know, you share so much in the film. Why shouldn't you share the award money if it gives your producer an incentive to really work on the film and to bring it out? Sorry, just a small note on the side.
Well, we didn't share, and it was not 20,000. I think it was 100,000.
Yeah, on features it's 100,000.
But the film had been so difficult to finance that, you know, it was not even. But this is an advice that maybe we'll put
duly
that.
noted.
But anyway, at the festival, after the prize, Julia came to me and she took me like this and she said, Juliette, because we're Julia. And she said, will you please produce me again? And of course I said, how can I not say yes? So it was just natural. It was obvious, whether I would like the script or not, but I'm not sure I would not like something coming from Julia when you work with a director that you really like and you spend all this time. It either works or it doesn't. And if it works, you keep going. Even if at some point the script, it's not really what you love, but you love the director, you have to keep going with the director. And I work a lot with first and second features, and this is what I like to do. I like to invest myself also for a long run.
For a long run, okay.
Yeah, the same thing is for us, because when you find a partner that you like to work with, you want to continue to keep in touch and working, and you just ask if you can actually help as a co-producer, no? Especially when you are a minority co-producer. If there is a way to actually help the movie, and you go.
Okay, so you took the decision based on love for the filmmaker, continued work, and the idea of sustain a career and support somebody on a further basis.
Yeah, and it was obvious that we would continue working the same team.
And
there was no question about, let's see who we can work with in Argentina. It was just obvious.
To me, it's still amazing that you never met him, in person, and that you could make it work via Skype. Because even though yes, Skype is good, you see the person, but there's still a certain distance. So
no, but I knew Julia, the director, and I knew Julia Solomonov.
But the co-producers.
Yeah, it's because
but she was the voice of Felicitas. Okay. She's credited as a producer.
Okay.
Yeah. Julia Solomonov is a producer on that film.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. And she works with Felicitas. And Julia Murat, she's also a co-producer, and she's a producer herself. She just produced the film that is in competition here, The Hires. She was the one setting this team together, so she knew everybody really well.
And that was right from the start, as I understood. You said it was 12 pages that you got, so all of you together started at a very, very early point.
Yeah, she wrote for a long time the script, so I think we followed different versions for a long time.
And how did you structure the development process? I mean, is it all of you giving notes? Is it just, it also depends obviously on your individual profile, but being a bigger team, since it's a 3-year co-production with the director also being a producer, there's a lot of people kind of having a perspective on the story. So I was wondering how you structured, the development work.
She's someone that likes to share a lot. So I think all of us made comments. Sometimes I Skyped with Juliette about a new version so that we don't give completely, different. We discussed, and then we, talked to Julia. We are all following it carefully. Julia Solomonov also, I think she likes to work like this, and I think we do too. So it makes sense. It made sense.
Yeah, we worked a lot on Skype, with Julia Solomonov and Tati and Julia. On her first feature, she actually came in France for a month, and we worked there together. I mean, she was writing and would give feedback, but it was very intensive. Here it was more by Skype, and Tati was there with Julia. It was not, to me, it was not so structured. Again, it was very...
Yeah, but I could understand that, or I would understand that there's a kind of coordination, because what you just said, you would talk to the co-producers, gather the intel, gather the notes, and then kind of be that one road towards Julia in order not to...
We would try to get our producers' messages in once.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a certain structure, not precisely like this, but there's a coordination in notes in order not to contradict each other. Yeah. Okay. What were the? How did you divide up the work? Who in the end delivered what? You don't have to go, for example, to the budget, but also percentage-wise, how did you all contribute to the production? And what did you do for that contribution in each particular territory?
France came with 25, Argentina 20, and the rest was Brazil. And the whole shooting was in Brazil. With a Brazil-Argentina agreement, we need to have technicians and actors. So we had 2 Argentinian actors incorporated in the film. And the DOP was Argentinian and the sound engineer too. And the biggest contribution, I think, actually came afterwards with the post-production because it was shared in Argentina, Brazil, and France.
That sounds quite difficult if you have, so it's a very rigid system that that you have to bring in Argentinian talent, even in front of the camera, if it's a film that's being shot in Portuguese and the actors.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's something that we are facing. I'm facing. There is my Chilean co-producer right there. And I just sent a Brazilian actor to the shootage in Santiago. It is something, the exchanging of technicians, I think it's really rich. It's really enlightening. We loved working with Soledad, the Argentinian DOP. With my other Argentinian co-producer, the DOP was French. So it's really, really interesting. But with actors, sometimes it's tricky because sometimes it doesn't make sense. We have this strong thing in Latin America that it's Portuñol. It's this hybrid of Portuguese and Spanish. So sometimes having a character that speaks Portuñol, it doesn't sound really strange because it's part of our daily lives, but it's tricky. And it's an obligation with almost, at least in Brazil, all the bilateral treats. You have to have at least 2 actors. They don't need to be the main character, but they have to be there. So with my Brazilian film that just released, there is a Uruguayan actor that plays an important role, but it didn't interfere in the sense of the story. But of course, it would be easier that if this is optional, right?
Did it a long time to cast the people in
No.
Argentina?
No, because the actress that we find a way to looking for actors that who live in Brazil so they can go to the shooting without problems.
Okay, so
In that case, you need to try to find, dual nationality people.
Yes, of course. But it just doesn't make things easier, does it? Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But it's, I think the tricky side of the co-production is the parameters that every single institution is asking you. And sometimes they don't connect at all. So with Brazil, it was very difficult because on the first feature film of Julia, there was really no support for first features. This is why the money came first from France and Argentina. We shot the film, and then they realized that there were international co-producers, and they gave some money, but more regional money. By the time she started developing her second feature, there's a very large new fund that was created that is very important for first features, but is also extremely strict. And I may say maybe they do not have the full experience of international co-production. So all the parameters that they gave to the Brazilian producers were a bit crazy because it was not doable to give them. For instance, if you would go with a film, you would know in advance which country you would co-produce with, and it had to be a minimum of 20% per country. So either you're...
already in place?
No, without being in place, because you go first as Brazilian. So you're either a very risky or not risky producer. Julia made the decision because she wanted to work together. She made the decision to apply to Ancine, saying, I will work with France and I will work with Argentina, and both these countries will bring 20%. But this was, for us, like, okay, now we have a lot of pressure. And what happens when you don't get it? Actually, the interesting part here is that we all got it, but it was very creative. And actually, I'll speak about France. We did multiple applications at the same time. The first one that we got was actually creative media with World Cinema Fund Europe. And they were asking 25%. So the European producer had to be 25%, but Ancine was not allowing a minimum or maximum of 20%. And there you're thinking, okay, so what do we do? Okay, then you talk to everybody, and we spoke with Ancine, and we said, look, we got the money, you have to accept that. But then, even more tricky, we didn't get Cinéma du Monde, we didn't get the main fund in France. So now we have a European fund, because we're a European company, production company, but we don't have the local public fund. So it was very creative. Us, as international sales, we put an MG on the film, which we hadn't planned at the beginning. And we were able to work, we did all the sound in France, and we worked with a company, a sound company, because they also knew Julia. They had given Julia for her first feature a prize in a festival in Cine Latino in Toulouse. They had given her a prize that we couldn't use because we had already planned all the post-production. They said, okay, we're coming on board. We will make this film, and we give everything in kind. So basically, we got this sound production. We did all the sound, part of, we collaborated, my company and this company, as, in-kind support.
So you could present it as an investment, which would raise your share.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, the Brazilian cinema agency...
Then we got a distributor to put an MG on the film, and who will distribute the film.
So eventually, you made the gap. You made up
so
the gap from Cinema du Monde
but
out of various sources.
It was a lot of gray hair and no voice.
Yeah.
But it was, you always find solutions. You're a producer. You must find solutions, and you have to get out of the box. You have to think other ways that. And you have to go talk to the institutions. And I hope creative media maybe will lower the percentage, because 25% is extremely difficult with Asian or Latin American co-productions to have. If you too European, now I'm doing another film. We also got creative media, not through World Cinema Fund, but through the Torino Film Lab. Creative media also gives part of this educational. They give a prize, and we won a prize with another first feature from Brazil, Maya Darin, that we'll start shooting in April. There it was more complicated. Torino, we didn't know it was part of creative media, sorry. So we got the prize, we're very happy, but on our financial plan, we're also thinking about presenting to World Cinema Fund Europe, to potentially Uber-Buzz Fund Europe, because you have to think of everything. And then we understand it's a creative media fund, meaning you cannot participate in any other creative media funded prizes or funds. So it's all things like this that you have to go back to Ancine, you have to go back to creative media. I mean, everywhere you have to discuss with the people, because at the end of the day, it's the producer who is dealing with everybody. Although it doesn't make sense, some things don't make sense, but I think we all learn together.
Did not getting Cinéma du Monde, did it change anything for you in the structure?
For us, also was very difficult that we can make understand that in Film Argentinian Institute that there was Argentinian elements in the movie, because the movie is 100%, the history is 100% Brazilian. So we decided to apply in the end when we have almost the international funds in place, and we did a very strong presentation with our previous work with Brazil. Pendular was the fifth project we did with Brazil, so it was very difficult, but the funny thing is that last year, here in the European film market, the Argentinian stand, you remember, it was the biggest poster for Argentina was Pendular, and they were very proud of the
It is actually, but all these actually create contents. Pendular was a precedent for the Brazilian Cinema Agency changing its rule for this fund. So now you're not obliged to compromise yourself to assure the 20% for each co-producer, because I was not able, I was forbidden to raise more money except from the 60 that was left. And now they became more flexible with this. But it's still always very tricky because Brazilian fund is probably now the one that has more money in Latin America, but you have to give it back. They participate in my quota in all the territories so it is tricky, you know, when you have friends, and if you're not official co-producer, you have to give your share, and they are the first ones that need to be paid back. So there are a lot of small things. And we actually made something really interesting, like 3 Berlinales ago, because also to make a co-production in Brazil, you have to start with a pre-recognition of an agreement. And actually CNC just gives this.
Just real quick, that means that you have to get some kind of national certificate for the project. In case some of you might not know this, you have to register the film and kind of present it, and then they'll say, yeah, under the way you want to do it, it can qualify as a French, as a Brazilian, as an Argentinian, as a German, whatever film. And Ancine needs this in order for you to be able to really apply, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
However,
in that case, Ancine was asking this before the funding was coming on board.
That's
so
how it is.
The CNC was telling me, and I knew that they wouldn't give us this paper until we would get the fund. So you had one part Brazilian, you know, we kept on talking, and I kept on saying, we're not going to get it. The most I can get is a mail from the CNC saying that we have applied. But, you know, it takes 4 months, so right now you need it, but I cannot give it to you. So
Did you fight? Did that cause conflict? I mean,
No, what we said, again...
It's an open question.
It was in Berlin, we came in Berlin, and we said, let's make a meeting between CNC and Ancine, and you two talk to each other, because we cannot do anything else. And they talked, and that was it. But Ancine was saying that they couldn't get in touch with anybody from CNC. CNC was saying, oh, but Ancine, blah, blah, blah. You know how they are. And so we said, okay, be face-to-face, talk to each other, and it was okay.
We set
At the end of the day, it was okay. To the bon, to the bon. And I never got the paper.
Okay. What would you do again, and what would you do differently in the future? I mean, what is, you know, have you sat down afterwards and went through the process in retrospect and looked at, you know, what happened and what maybe didn't happen, and what would you do differently?
I think by the end, the results were really, really good for us and for the film itself. The film won FIPRES Award in Panorama. Then it traveled to several festivals. They're still selling for, you know, different countries, and it's a very art house score that maybe we're gonna show you a teaser very soon. The film was successful, and for us too, the process, even to elucidate, at least with Ancine and CNC and Inca, I think actually changes were made, and maybe there are, of course, several to be made regarding these very stricted rules that doesn't help a producer, like the obligation of percentages or this obligation of casts. I don't think there is something that I would do different, because I think we did everything we could. So maybe hoping that the next one will be a little bit easier.
I don't think so.
Hope dies last, right? Yeah, you mentioned the teaser that we actually totally forgot to show at the beginning, right, Christina? Didn't we want to start off by showing something? There was another thing. There's 2 more things. Maybe we should then show it at the very end. Maybe. then before we open up for questions, why don't we show the trailer for the film?
Você nem pensou em se arrepender daquela dança, então segui calado, olho no olho, beijo acanhado. Seu caminho é um carnaval, o meu não é um só vaiar.
Aquela linha cor de laranja é o quê, hein?
Para dividir.
Pra dividir o quê?
Minha área de trabalho e da dela.
Tá ficando impossível pra mim.
O que você precisa?
Um pouco mais de espaço.
Quando é que a gente vai ver alguma coisa sua?
Tá perguntando como amigo ou como crítico?
Um pouco dos dois.
Bom, pro crítico eu diria que tô fazendo uma coisa incrível.
Pro amigo.
Pro amigo eu diria que eu não tenho a mais pálida ideia do que eu tô fazendo.
O que você fez hoje?
Tava esperando um pensamento chegar.
Chegou?
Sim.
É bonito?
Não.
They look real beautiful. I haven't seen the film, I have to admit. Any questions from your side? Yes, please. Hold on 1 second, there's a microphone coming.
What contains all this 20 or 25%? It's just finance or all that staff and technique and everything? Or what exactly?
I didn't really understand. Could you repeat maybe a little louder? Because it was hard to hear down here.
So if you participate with 20 or 25%, what does it mean exactly? It is all technique, staff, directing, finance, or it's just
No,
finance?
From France, it was some finance. It was finance coming from sales agent, coming from distribution, French distribution, coming from Europe, World Cinema Fund, and then an in-kind, meaning all the labs, the mix, everything. We did the sound editing in Brazil, and then Julia and the sound editor came to France, and we finished everything in France. So it was, part of finance and creative done in France for some post-production. And the rest, all the image post-production was done in Argentina. So then we communicated a lot because they did all the image post-production and all deliverables.
Yes, for Argentina was a DOP, the crew, the DOP, the sound in the shooting, and then we did all the post-production in Argentina and the deliveries.
So these, your 20%, did they have to be spent in Argentina as well, or was there money that you could?
We have to spend the money in Argentina. We are not allowed to send the money. It was very difficult in this time to send the money, so we
You have a high export tax?
Send equipment also and the crew.
Yeah, it's always a tricky part when you get in Brazil, when you get a lot of financing outside of Brazil, because you get import tax, like you were saying. And it's always a line that you mustn't forget in a budget because it adds up. I'm now doing a new film in Brazil, and they hadn't really put that line there. So we're trying to see, can we do more in France than expected so that we don't spend that import tax? But I don't know if there are other countries in Latin America that they do that. But this is new, isn't it?
It's
Just for an understanding, maybe not everybody understood. If you're transferring money out of Brazil, you pay 30% tax on this. So I was a German producer on Praia do Futuro, a film by Karim Manous, first official German-Brazilian co-production, and we had a large part of the shoot take place in Berlin. Brazil was the majority delegate producer, Curaçao da Selva, and so they had to finance parts of the shooting here in Germany because the money that we raised in Germany wasn't enough to cover the shoot. So basically, for each 100,000 euro that Georgia, the producer, would send from Brazil to Germany, we had to pay 30,000 euro in taxes. So only 70,000 euro ended up on the screen, but 30,000 euro went to the Brazilian government right away.
Another challenge for Brazil, maybe for the whole Latin America, besides taxes that are really an issue, it's the fact that the currency is always floating. So I remember when I was applying for Hubert Balls with Pendular and different funds every day in dollars, the budget was a completely different one. You know, it doubled depending on the economy of the country. It was reduced. So it's a bit tricky for, of course, the more established economies like co-producing with Europe needs to be, and even, I mean, in between Brazil and Argentina or Brazil and Chile, whatever, it's always hard to predict how much, by the time that you're shooting, how it's going to be the currency and how much the money you have in place will actually means for
how
if
much
it's
you
in
can
dollars
afford
or
for
euros.
this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, please. Hold on.
All right. So when you're funding a project, to what extent would you, based on where the funding is coming from or how it's panning out, to what extent would you sort of allow the story to be modified? I mean, I know that of course there are decisions in where you hire the crew from, etc., and that's done normally. But to what extent would the story, does it happen that the story has to be modified to go from maybe one country to another, depending on how the funding is really coming through?
You already mentioned it. No, that whether the story is modified according to certain rules and regulations. You know, we were talking about the actors needing to come from Argentina, so you create a character that speaks that particular language.
Yeah, I think this is the only restriction for actually the story itself.
In France, there's no restrictions really. I mean,
You need French language. You need French language in France.
No, but I mean, it depends how you set up the whole production. But I'm a French producer, but I mainly work with international films and filmmakers. And for example, right now I'm main producer on a first feature from Egypt. So the story is totally Egyptian. It will be an Egyptian shot in Egypt, but I'm the main producer. So what do I do in France? So it's mainly the financing, and of course, in order again to get this agrément, this French nationality, they force you to spend money. So, but so in France, it's mainly, of course, artistic is a huge point and protection that we have. So we don't ask for, I mean, it's a whole setup of points. So if you send actors, you get a lot of points. But it really has to make sense. So for you as a producer, I tend to usually send crew, which is not always easy because, you know, you need to have a crew that's going to get along between, I did a film, for example, in Georgia, and had the sound and the DOP coming from France. And we thought it was going to be easy, just 2-3 technicians, but it actually was very difficult, you know, because the French always think that they're best. But Georgia was the Soviet country for the film, the Soviet films at the time, so it's a huge country on film. So they also think they're the best, and they're also very arrogant. So those two cultures were very difficult. The first week of preparation was difficult. But I think it's, unless an actor really makes sense to bring to a country, I would really advise to work with technicians or to do the post-production, not to jeopardize the artistic side. On this Egyptian project, we have looked into French Egyptian or French Arabic, but it's not working. It's not working. So we're going to work with a French Tunisian DOP, French Arabic, but no crew. I'm not sure that was a question. I didn't hear the beginning of your question because we were talking. But
yeah, no, I mean, that was the question. I guess the only other part of the question was that if it's a story that is a little bit sort of location agnostic and, you know, you move it from one country to another. But I guess that's an obvious answer. That would happen if...
But that happened. I know for a fact that this has happened with an Irani film that was supposed to be shot in Turkey, ended up in Chile.
In Chile.
So again, each film is a prototype. I think it's very difficult to compromise the artistic value of a film. You know, you can take rules and regulations as a challenge, and it's actually also something positive to turn it into an advantage. You know, by hiring, you know, a DOP that you would never thought of because you usually work with your regular DOP, for example. As soon as it comes to, you know, incorporating certain characters in order to be able to take actors from one country to the other, it already gets difficult. But I guess in the example that we just mentioned, you know, they took the story from one place completely to the other. It's hard to say whether the film is better or not, or would have been better to be shot in another country. But there are these examples, these extreme examples. You know? It just, what you just said, it just needs to make sense, whatever that might mean then in that situation. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's super inspiring to hear you guys talk and see like the trust that you have in each other. And I think, you know, film business is a personal business, so I think it's so good to see like it's so much about personal relationships. So it's really beautiful to see your example. I have two practical questions. First is coming back to the currency that you were talking about. I'm doing currently a Mexican co-production, and the peso gets like, yeah, devaluated like every day. So it's like, I don't know, like, do you guys then like wait for a good time to send the money? So it's like, or it's just like, okay, it's just whatever it works. You know what I mean? That would be my first question. Like, how do you deal with that if you like wait for a good moment? And the second is regarding like deal memos and contracts. So like, when do you write a deal memo? When do you write the final contract? Because of course, depending on like what financing is gonna come into place, the percentages are gonna change, right? So like how, yeah, what would be the way to go with that?
Yeah, we are very used to deal with the currents, and it depends on the time of the project and the time of the schedule of the actors. It depends. The thing is that when you decide to make the co-producer, you go back and make a lot of paperwork alone and do your job in the institute, in the film institute, and then you, when you finally receive the answer, the approval, you go back and say, well, what do you need, when do you need, and make the real co-production work, make it in place. But it's a process, you know. Mm-hmm.
Plus, I mean, if you do the D memo and the co-production agreement, that's one thing, but you know, the financing plan is an addendum, so it gives you even a little more time to, you know, to agree on having another financing plan as an addendum, so you can update this. So it's hard to pinpoint. Again, I think it's different for each film and every process. So you just need to figure out what's the best moment for you. Unfortunately, no more practical answer than that.
But usually you sign a deal memo at the beginning to set the co-production and to see what you're going to be doing. And the co-production, the long form might be signed once the film is finished. I mean, you should try to do it maybe before shooting, but most of the time the film is not financed fully before shooting. So it's and then it's an addendum, it's an appendix in your memo, in your co-production contract. So you can also change I mean, sometimes you change until the last moment because you keep on getting financing somehow. But once you you just set in the deal memo just the rules, mainly. The percentage can vary, but just the rules.
And the currency thing isn't predictable, so it's
You can try.
Yeah, and again, that is the importance to find a good partner to trust them, in the whole process.
I mean, there are financial products that you can actually use as a kind of insurance against the change of a currency. So if you have little money to spare, you might take a bet on securing certain ranges, but that's only for bigger budgets that have a fund, that have that put into the budget. So there are ways around it, technical ways, financial technical ways, but probably for a film like this would be too expensive. Yes, please, there were a couple of hands.
Thank you very much. It's very, very interesting. And for us who's first-time filmmakers or second-time filmmakers, it's very, very important to know all these details. I just wanted to ask in terms of, imagine the project has come to Egypt and you became the main producer. I assume because they weren't experienced enough that, sometimes the project comes to you and rather than asking you to be co-producer, they're asking you to be main producer. So if that happens, what happens to the copyright and the final cut? Is it something you agree in advance, or if you become main producer, let's say, then things change?
So the way it worked is the name of the filmmaker is Omar El Zoheri. He did the Ciné Fondation residence. It's the Cannes Film Festival residence in France for 4 months. I had read a treatment before he came to the Ciné Fondation, and I really liked it. So I was interested in meeting him. But he knew then that he wanted to work with a main producer in Europe. Actually, it was not specifically French, but in Europe. And that was a surprise to me. I wanted to meet with him to co-produce, but not to be the main producer. So that was actually a difficult decision to make because it's risky also to be main producer on a film that you're going to fully shot in a totally foreign country, foreign culture. But the reason is not necessarily that we have more experience or in a certain aspect we have more experience. So he has a producer in Egypt. They actually produce his short film, but they're a very, very, very large company who have never done any co-productions, who don't work with international markets. They're fully Egyptians. They work with very big blockbusters, Egyptian blockbusters. They release, and they're a big distributor. They make about 20 films a year, and they've decided, since they've been working with Omar, that they want to support 1, 2, 3 young filmmakers who are more auteur filmmakers. But they don't have the knowledge of the international market, and Omar wanted a producer who would go, I mean, the way we work is being very advanced in the project. So we work really from development all the way until the film is released in the first festival. And you think of the entire strategy. You have the overview of the entire strategy, but I've spent 2 years developing this project. Actually, I just received a new version of the script last night. But so this is something that the Egyptians don't do. They want to film, they're more into big commercial films. So this is the reason why Omar, and because he was doing the Ciné Fondation, he was in Paris for 4 months. We got to meet for a coffee, and we ended up spending 6 hours together talking. And then he said, but I want you to be my producer. And I said, what do you mean? But you, as the main producer. And so then it was, talks with my partner in the company to decide, do we do this? We also had another Brazilian film at the same time and a Tunisian film. It's timing, you have to think of all that. As far as copyrights, we own the rights of the script. We are the main producer, but when we met the Egyptian producer, they came to visit in Paris. They're coming back again on Thursday. We went there. I told them, I am working hands in hands with you. I cannot produce if we are not working hands in hands, because you will own the entire shooting. You know what you'll be doing during the shooting. So it's a trust, and if you don't have the trust, you cannot do this.
Sorry to interrupt. Imagine if the script had come to you as complete script and you still like it, but the other party is less experienced and therefore they want you to be main producer. Is this something that we can work out, that still they will have the final cut and the copyright, or as soon as you become a main producer rather than co-producer, those becomes a more gray area? That's what I'm interested in. Sorry.
I mean, I don't know if you want to answer.
On all the international co-productions that I've done, it's like 12 films, I think, by now, 15. The director always had final cut.
Yeah.
So
it's the filmmaker
it's really,
the
I
final
mean,
cut.
yeah, it's usually auteur film, so they have final cut. What we always agree on is if we don't agree on the director's cut, let's put it that way, that we have a right to edit our own cut and then screen both cuts to a test audience that consists of, let's say, 20 people the director invited and 20 people that we invited, and we'll have a question and answer afterwards, and we'll figure out which one is the better version. So that's usually the way that we have set it up in our contracts. So having final cut is usually with the director, at least in whatever.
Yeah, it's a difference between the rights of the film and the final cut. The rights we own, I mean, not, of course, it's a chain, of rights. The author is always there, but the final cut, is the filmmaker. Of course, it's a discussion. If you're in disagreement, then you have to discuss it. But at the end of the day, he can just say, okay.
And it's also a legal question, because, for example, in Germany, you can't own the copyright always stays with the copyright holder. So a writer will always have his copyright. So me as a producer, I only get the right to exhibit, to exploit that right, So I don't own the copyright, I just own the right to use his work, forever and always, which is different to the US, where you can actually buy the copyright and then he's left with nothing. So it's also a legal question that is vastly different from territory to territory.
But each country is different, I guess, in terms of that agreement, whether the production company has the right to the film or not, isn't it?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Thank you very much.
There's a question over there, the young man with the hat.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. I'm a bit nervous. When you think of your first feature film as a producer, would you maybe share what went really, really well and what didn't?
Your first film as a producer, your first ever production, what went really, really good and what went really, really wrong, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You wanted to learn from mistakes. What went wrong? What's basically a beginner's mistake?
It depends what is your first feature, because I started a first feature that took 5 years. So in the meantime, I made other films. So I'm not sure what my first feature is.
Your first production.
Yeah, my first production, the same. But it was supposed to be, I worked with Lepoutre, I was the French producer of The Touring Horse, and the film took 6 years. So that was the first film I thought I was going to produce. But I ended up producing the first feature by Adrian Citaru, Pescuit Sportiv, Romanian filmmaker. This is a difficult question.
I would say to rush into production too quickly.
Yes.
That would be one thing. That spend more time in development than you actually think, and more time than the director actually wants. Sorry, directors, first-time directors. But that would be my advice.
Yeah.
I have almost the same situation as Juliette. My 01 project just premiered in the beginning of this year in Sundance and Rotterdam, and in this in-between, I had 2 others completed. So for this one, I think for all of them, I think to make sure that the script is fully developed, this is for sure, just, not going to the shooting with issues, because for sure the issues will remain during shooting, and of course they'll be in the editing room as well, and in the final cut. So it's, my advice is really to be pushy regarding the script, and also to get to know really well who you are working with, the filmmaker and the fellow co-producers. I think it's really, really important, this trust that we had. I think that gives us strength to move forward and solve everything in the nicest possible way, to endure the adventure of producing itself.
For me, my first experience was with a friend of mine, and it was great, and he became my best friend. So for me, it was a very good experience.
Thank you for sharing.
I would just add one thing. I think you must be passionate about the project. You must love the filmmaker. And if you love the project, but you don't get along so well with the filmmaker, don't go for it. And it's really, for a first film, I would say don't expect to make any money. Try to figure out how you're going to live during the time you're going to produce your first film, because it comes very late, if it comes.
But also make sure that you do earn some money at least. I'm not a big fan of, I'm not going to earn any money on this, because you want to continue do other work. So
yeah,
you need to earn money in some way or the other, So it's a difficult task, but it enables you to continue doing your work, It's always very difficult when people say, I give up everything, and,
No. I'm saying with production, with that film. So try to figure out how you're going to live, and what else are you going to do, because you will need to support yourself, and it's not with the film. It's going to take 2-3 years.
I totally, even with second film, is really tough.
After 12 years is the same.
But about passion, I think this is fundamental. I just want to make films that I want to watch afterwards as a cinephile. So if if otherwise, why would you be doing independent cinema?
Any other question? Yes, please. Wow, well done.
Excellent throw. The one thing we were kind of touching on working with directors a little bit as well, because there are actually quite a lot of people in this marriage, which makes it a bit tricky. With co-productions and the different kind of rules and regulations, when do you communicate to the filmmaker, maybe we need to rewrite the script, or is it an ongoing process all the time of can we do this or can we do that? How much do you communicate to your director, and how much do you wait until it's absolutely necessary?
It depends also on the filmmaker, if he, wants to know. But I think you have to communicate. He needs to know how difficult it's going to be. So I think you have to communicate. Of course, at some point, when you really are done with, you have to leave him or her, the space as well. So don't always talk about all your problems. But he needs to know. It's not easy. So I would share in advance. And some producers don't share anything. I'm not like that, but it depends on the filmmaker again. It's always, every single filmmaker is different. So you have to think in advance how you're what is your strategy?
I guess as soon as you know that it's going to influence whatever you're doing, and it's influencing his work. As soon as if you have the first idea, it could be done like this, but that would mean that. That's the point, I guess, where you have to talk and share, because because whatever result of the talk you're going to have, it will have an effect on whether it makes sense to move forward with the idea you had or not. So, and I guess to share more is better to share less. So more communication is better than less communication, because less communication will always most likely lead to dissatisfaction.
And with Omar, for example, when he asked, for me to be main producer, he said, and I want to shoot in 8 months. I said, okay, so 1, you will not shoot in 8 months. Maybe in 1 year and 8 months, maybe even more. And 2, I'm gonna have to spend money. So are you okay if we have some French technicians, French crew? Are you okay in doing post-production in France? And that you share right away, because otherwise you cannot be a main producer. So it's, you know, you will know what you need to share and what you wait a little bit. But I am in total agreement. It's better to share more than less.
Yes, please.
What is the usual? Yeah? That is. We broke it. So what's the usual timeline between you deciding that, yes, I want to work on this script, to applying for funding, to getting the money, and to starting shooting?
It totally depends how is the development of the script and how long it's going to take the funding. And we're just sharing the experience of our 01 projects that took, in my case, 4 years and a half, from the beginning of the script to the premiere. It actually depends, but in Brazil, it's not that fast, so just 8 months would be completely out of, it really takes, I'd say, 4 years is average time.
I would say don't present a script to funding that you're not 300% with. Because like you've seen, there's a lot of people out there with films. There's more and more co-production. It's more and more competitive. So really present a script that you really feel it's a strong script. Because even when you have a strong script, there's too much competition. And you never know who else you're going to have in front of you. I mean, in France, for Cinéma du Monde, it's extremely, extremely difficult. And you just don't know. You know, with the new fund, I waited like 2.5 years before I actually got it. Now I got it 3 times in a row. So you just don't know. I don't think I presented too early. But again, competition, this is a fund that is open to anybody in the world. It can also be a French director shooting in Brazil. So just know that it's a huge competition, and just like, when are you going to pick the project? You know, you go to Berlinale Co-Production Forum, or you go to Rotterdam Cinema, and you see all these projects. Go with a project that you really like, and you think you can participate, you know, in any kind of ways. It's very difficult if you make auteur cinema. I mean, I don't know if maybe some people are making some more genre films. You can make some genre auteur films as well. But it's extremely, there's less and less money, and there's more and more production. So, I mean, in Brazil, when I started working in Brazil, it was almost 10 years ago. How many films coming out of Brazil?
200 last year.
No, but 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
I mean, last year, between Rotterdam and Berlin, there were 27 films.
Yeah,
this year
23 films in Rotterdam, and I think 13 here in Berlin.
So you're even competing with each other, you know? Because of course they cannot take 23 Brazilian films. So it's, you know, everything has a timing, and you really need to take some distance all the time to see what is the best strategy, and talk to the co-producers. You know, sometimes the local producer, you know, because they want to shoot, they want you to present, but you don't think it's ready. And sometimes you let go and you present, but you know you were not ready. So, but you have to have the strength to say no, discuss why, and be in agreement with everybody.
And always factor in that, obviously, delegate producer needs to have his money in place first, or at least more than half of the money, before you as a minority partner can do anything out of your own country. Usually, it was different with the first film that you produced of the director, but I think that's highly unlikely that, you know, other countries will support a filmmaker from a third country without there being any support. So. Yes, so he needs to get his money first, and then if you're a minority, then you can start. Anything else is a waste of time.
I tend not to present to Cinéma du Monde if the local fund is not in place. The public fund.
And vice versa, if you're the delegate, you need to factor that in. That, you know, it will then take, once you got your money, it will take another time to get the money from the minority partners.
I would like to ask Veronica from Medium Board also, when you're hearing our discussion here between the producers here, what is your advice?
I think my advice would be the same as the producers said on stage. I mean, this is the same for us. If it's a minority production, we need the majority, the other country in place before we go in. And of course, the script must be good. For us, it's also very important to have like a good distribution plan with art house cinema. You know, like a good world sales. It's very important for art house cinema, for co-productions. We also always need like a German distribution. This is sometimes a bit difficult, of course, but we need it in our guidelines. So the same advice as you already gave on stage, I would say.
Talking about sales, or is there any other questions? Sorry, didn't want to. Oh yeah, back there, somebody's waving. You've been waiting for some time, right? I'm sorry. Uh-oh. I'll give it. Oh, there you go.
Hello, I have a personal question for the three of us. You, Juliette, you talk about to be passionate about a project. I would like to know from you, what do you look for in a script when you receive a script, and what makes you feel in love with it and decide to engage yourself producing it during all this time, through the years, in fact?
Well, it's difficult to talk about passion. You never know. I'm not looking for anything. Actually, it's funny. I had the same question in Sao Paulo a few months ago. A filmmaker said, "But what do I need to do in my script?" I said, "I don't know. I cannot tell you. Just I'm not expecting. I mean, I'm not searching for anything. I'm not expecting anything. But am I going to read the script and after 10 pages I'm going to fall asleep, or am I going to read in 2 hours and I don't know, feel moved or feel like there's something political that I want to be part of? Again, does it make sense that me as a French producer, I come in on board? I don't think I have a recipe to give you for that. I think this is very personal, and I don't even know if I know myself what I'm not looking for anything, really. It's scripts that you read like this and that you really like from the beginning. You get into the characters, you understand them. And some others where you don't, on the first reading you can't get it. And then you meet the filmmaker and the producer and they keep on wanting to work with you and they send you a second script. Sometimes you can get convinced. But yeah, passion, I mean, I don't know. How do you get passionate of something? It's difficult to answer that question.
Well, I know, for example, in your, if you, I have another question. For example, I saw the profile of your company. It's maybe really interesting in films setting in Southern America or Africa, or films that maybe deals with stories and peoples and words that not the common cinema usually forgets about. So maybe this could be for maybe a screenwriter or a director that wants to send a script to you, maybe could really see what you usually produce. So maybe you are in kind of art house films setting in Brazil or Tunisia, and maybe you are quite strongly lined up on this kind of film. Maybe that's what my question about love and interest in a certain kind of films.
Yeah, but honestly, I would love to make a very good French comedy, and I would make some money. But I am reading French script, and I'm not, you know. But maybe it's also your personality. You know, I was born in Argentina. I grew up in Spain. I lived in San Francisco for 15 years. I'm not really French. So when I started producing, it was natural to go for international films and working with international filmmakers. it's also part of you. I like to work with women filmmakers, but now I'm producing 2 male filmmakers. You know, there's no recipe. It comes at a time, the script landing in your hands on the right time or not. So I can receive, it's true that when you tend to specialize in international films, I receive a lot more. And then when you make one Brazilian film, you have all Brazil sending you scripts. But it's true that we're in a market where people put you in a case, in a box. But you don't want to. If you have a comedy, if you have a film, a genre film, I'm always interested. But, you know, I need to get into it. It has to be good. And again, that's another question to respond.
What about the two of you? Is there anything that you look for? Is it maybe certain characters? Is it?
For me, there is not just one scene. It's the whole package. Maybe it can be an idea, the filmmaker, because it's a long process, you know, and maybe in the time you development the script and the finances and the financing part, and you can do it because it's very hard in this time. So for me, it's not one scene. It's a very a package that we develop together with the filmmakers and the co-production partners and everything.
I think it's all about how you feel about the script that you're reading. You can be affected. If it affects me, and I like all kind of cinema. So I'm a cinephile. So if the essence affects me, then of course I'll be much likely wanting to work. Also, if there's a previous film that I really loved, and then maybe it will be, of course, more open to working in a new one. But I don't think there is a recipe. It's really how do you feel about and how you connect. The film that it's called Noveline that just premiered, I remember I was lying in my couch reading the 10 pages argument that they sent, and I had a tear in my eyes already foreseeing the film, and that's how I feel 4 years and a half afterwards when I see it in the screen. So I knew that there was something there, and knowing that there's hard work producing, you really have to have this feeling that it makes sense for you fighting for this to happen. So I think that's...
Any other question? Oh, sorry. Yes?
I might have missed it. How big was your budget?
On this film? It was well, again, it depends in reals or in euros, but around 600,000 euros.
He was every semester it was a different budget because of the currency. So I remember different figures while we were submitting funds during the years.
Inflation can vary at 100 to 200,000 euros. You start with a budget and there's 100,000, 200,000 difference between the time you actually use the currency or not.
Yeah, the real, it's Brazilian money. When we started, I think it was €1 was €2, and now it's 4.
Now it's 4.
So.
And how much % did you take out for yourself? I mean, sorry, because it was said you have to find a job to do it.
You want to know?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Not enough.
It's a minus.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
When you apply to a national fund, do you have to say to your fund that this film will be a co-production with this and these countries? And what I ask from you is like 20% or 40% of the budget. Do you have such requirements in your national funds? And what happens if the situation changes after you have confirmation, for example. Why I am asking? Because in my country, I'm a producer from Ukraine. There are such restrictions, and it is very difficult to change the status of your film after you receive approval of financing from the State Film Institute. For example, if I applied as a 100% national Ukrainian production, and then I accidentally found a good co-producer, and we would like to continue, it is very difficult, almost impossible, to change and to negotiate it back with the Film Institute. And I wonder if it's a case in other countries, and how do you deal with it? Thank you.
As we were talking in the beginning, actually this happened with the main Brazilian fund that was created for innovative language. It means for young and author films, young filmmakers and author films. In the first, we were the first range of projects applied for this fund, and they were very restricted, obliging us, telling in advance if you were co-producing, how many countries, and in Brazil, you have this minimum amount of 20% to co-produce with whatever country. I just got an exception actually lately, but anyways, it was really tough and really hard to cope. So we discussed it with the Brazilian Cinema Agency, and now it's a bit more flexible. So it can change during the process. You have to inform them. For example, now we have Korea in our Chilean film, and I have, I'm sending them the contract with Korea, because that will actually affect their share in the territory. So Korea won't be able to be touched by Brazil. So it's all this is really important that you just being updates, talk with the agents.
Yes, please. Almost.
Yes, I would like to know if you are a fresh producer and you have fresh filmmaker, how can you convince the fund to support you? Is it like a lotto to win a lotto, or are there any? Do you have to know anybody there, or how do you convince them to support you?
I think the first thing is you have to be convinced yourself. So it's a lot easier when you believe it in something to make the other believe. So this is the main thing. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes you need international recognition so that your own country can recognize it too. So Hubert Bossium Fund, it's always really important for Brazilian films, because
are there any clear criteria for that, or?
If he has won awards, for example,
Yeah.
The short films. If you want to make a first feature, look at what he has done before. Those are the best arguments that you possibly can have.
Being selected to international platforms such as La Fabrique du Cinéma du Monde, or the Cinemart, or the co-production market, or the Talents, it helps a lot, of course.
But I would say also, if you're convinced as a producer, is maybe because also you saw something, a previous work. So to have a good short film, I know in France when you present, or any European funds, you need to be able to show either another feature film that he made, or if it's a first feature, a short film. They need to see that they're reading a very good script, but can the filmmaker make this script? So having a short film is, I would say, crucial.
Or shoot at least one of the scenes out of the script, for example, if he hasn't done anything before, and which sometimes also might be the case.
Hi, I just wanted to share some information because I'm Chilean. My name is Rocio, and I'm Tati's co-producer in a film which I'm majority co-producer, and I got my funding the last. And actually, we did get Brazil money first, and they had 20% back then. Now it has grown. And I guess I have to thank you, Tati, for believing, because I know now as a minority co-producer, it's hard to be funded, and I didn't have the money to shoot my film, and I already had the Brazilian money to post-produce something that I didn't have. And for me as a producer, that was a very difficult position because you have to be very flexible in how you shoot the film and how you don't let everybody down, like you have post-production. But in my country's case, it's the fund is very competitive, as I'm sure in a lot of countries is. And they saw that I had Brazilian money, and then they gave me money. So it depends every time, I think. It's very hard, but I guess I just thank you, Tati, for believing in the film. I just want to say, because and believing in me as a producer that I could actually get the money to produce the film. So I guess it's a message for everybody, like in financing, just be brave, keep trying.
Any other question? I noticed one thing, maybe to wrap this up. It becomes a little more detailed again, but something that I noticed while talking, because you're also doing sales on the film. So there's an interesting setup that you're 3 co-producers, but one of the co-producers is doing sales, and I would just like to hear how that changes your relationship with your sales agent, obviously, because you've done other films that have been sold by a sales company, a sales agent. Is that something that you would always try to do now, to incorporate your sales as a co-producer and have maybe a closer relationship with them?
I actually have a close relationship with my actual sales that is gonna very soon make a lecture. They will have a table here, the New Europe Film Sales, and with my first one that was Figa Film. So I think, of course, for us with Pierre and Juliette, and Pierre has this long background as a sales himself, was actually really fluid. But I think this is another relationship that my advice should really be attempted to, because you spend years making a film, and then all of a sudden you're going to give in the hands of someone that might give, appreciating that or not. You can easily be forgotten by a sales after the festival that your film premiere, because this sales maybe will have 1,000 films afterwards in the second festival of the year. So the sales thing, it's a personal advice that you have to research a lot in not only the films that they are working with, but maybe some people that they worked, checking. I was surprised for New Europe. I went to see Summer 1993 in a cinema in Brazil. It's a Catalan film, it's a small film, I really loved. And they managed to have it sold to Brazil. That's now a really tough territory. A small film from a country that doesn't have a language, it's not in English. So that's the way it is. I don't know if I'm looking for co-producers with sales. I'm for sure gonna have a film with Juliette again, but who knows? Maybe she won't be the sales, because.
And actually, this was not the plan from the beginning, because we don't always sell the films that we produce or co-produce. It's actually, again, it depends on the film. Does this film deserve and can get a bigger sales agent? Does it need a bigger sales agent? So it came, while we were editing the film and starting to show the film, and then the film was selected here, and we said, okay, let's go for it. But it was not a decision from the beginning, and we sell sometimes our film with Julia, because we had done the first one, and sometimes we work with, much bigger sales agent. It depends on what the film needs.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree, it's crucial to get the right sales agent.
How often did you send around the rough cut? Would you meet for rough cut screenings together, or because that's after development, that's again a point where you work together creatively, and again, communication
Skype
is key.
I don't want to advertise too much, but Skype.
Huh? Skype. Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah, Istanbul. I don't know where you're from. Oh, introduce me to a good distributor there.
Online, maybe? Okay, if there are no more questions, then I guess that's a wrap. Thank you very much for all your open answers. Thank you very much for listening so closely and asking all the questions. And yeah, happy Berlinale. Thank you.
Thank you.
So before everybody's leaving here, we will have a break of 5 minutes, and then we start with the network breakout session here again in this room. We have also some drinks here, coffee, and something to eat here. So please also use this opportunity, stay here and also talk to each other. And I also